The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to Prisym ID's Dropping the Gavel on Counterfeit Drugs webinar. My name's Ray Collier-Suzuki and I'll be your webinar host today. Please note, we'll be muting all the telephone lines during the webinar except for the speakers. We're expecting the main part of the presentation to last approximately 40 minutes, followed by a question and answer session. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please submit them using the question tool on your screen. We'll collate all the questions from the presentation and we'll look to answer as many as possible at the end. We'll also provide a written response to delegates of all the questions received during the event. Following the event, we'll also be posting a copy of the audio and video from this session onto the Prisym ID website, and we'll be notifying all registered attendees when it's available. During today's webinar, we hope that you'll be able to explore key issues that keep pharmaceuticals and medical devices safe from counterfeiting, identify the differences between serialization and e-pedigree, learn how to implement a serialization strategy in an evolving regulatory and compliance environment, and understand how serialization is the foundation for optimizing business practices. Today we have two specialist speakers, Robert Nienke and Marcus Lawson, who will talk through how serialization will enable pharmaceutical manufacturers to beat counterfeiting to keep you and your customers safe. I'm Prisym ID Systems Sales Manager. I'm a specialist with over 16 years in delivering labelling and asset management solutions within the manufacturing, distribution and supply chain environment. Robert Nienke is active as EMEA Business Development Director Life Sciences for Oracle, focusing on pharmaceutical supply chain management and manufacturing solutions with a specific interest in prevention of counterfeit pharmaceuticals, authentication, tracking and tracing. Marcus Lawson is an independent serialization specialist who's worked closely with organizations such as Oracle and other pharmaceutical manufacturers over the last 5 years. His particular interest in serialization has been focused on both the management of serial numbers and the business processes that surround them. So, without further ado, let me hand over to Marcus.
Thank you, Ray. I think it's worth pointing out early on that what we're talking about is protecting patient safety. Counterfeiting is the scourge of our times, and it's not just handbags or car parts, but now it's medicines and devices. Quite often in these meetings, people say, oh yes, it's just about lifestyle drugs, such as Viagra, but this is far from the case. So although the internet has caused a massive explosion of people ordering their own medications, what we're actually talking about also are cancer drugs and antimalarials and similar medications. This has very serious concerns both to the industry, the regulators, and particularly the patients who unwittingly often put themselves at risk. It's estimated that counterfeit drug commerce will grow 13% annually through 2010, and scarily this illegal business will generate $75 billion in revenues this year, a 92% increase from 2005, equating to the combined 2000 revenues of two of the largest manufacturers in the world, such as Pfizer and AstraZeneca. The FDA alone has seen an 800% increase in the number of new counterfeit cases between 2000 and 2006. It's estimated that counterfeit medicines will account for 10 to 30% of the market in developing countries, a constant threat to the health of millions of people. can be impacted on huge scales. What you can see here is an Interpol report showing that $20 million worth of counterfeit and illegal medicines were seized at the beginning of the year. And that's an estimate of $12 million worth were counterfeits. But interestingly, the remaining $8 million were either diverted, expired, or unregistered drugs. And what that means for patients and also for the legitimate supply chain is that you could be providing drugs that actually can create major damage to patients, even though in principle the drugs are genuine. So we're looking at solutions here that can cover a variety of scenarios. And because everyone tends to think it can't happen to us, it's not happening in the States, it doesn't happen in Europe, nothing can be further from the truth. This is a global problem. And indeed, recently 2 million counterfeit needles were found in Europe. So we're not just talking about medicines, but we're also talking about medical devices used to provide medication in all sorts of different ways to patients. And this impacted the UK, Poland and the Netherlands. And as you can see here, interestingly, there are still 30,000 items unaccounted for. And that's a very scary thing. If you're a diabetic, what does this mean for you? And importantly, what does it mean for your reassurance for what you get from your pharmacy or your doctor? A multi-layered approach. This is very important. The drug industry over many years, the pharma industry over many years, has developed a variety of anti-counterfeiting strategies. And these are both covert, where you can look for them but can't see anything, and overt, where you can use solutions such as optical devices, such as holograms or colour-changing inks. So a lot of it's about sophisticated pack design and labelling, but more and more it's going down to nanoparticles and other types of taggant as well. And I think we have to be very clear, although a lot of more IT type and data-driven solutions are being proposed and are starting to be implemented and piloted, we're not saying that this multi-layered approach should change. There have to be different layers addressing different elements within the solution profiles for counterfeiting. So, as a more sort of modern approach, we're looking at e-pedigree, codification and serialization, and we'll cover these in more detail later. As we've already highlighted, we're talking about a global problem, but it's interesting to look at three areas in particular. Let's look at Europe. Europe has a similar situation as to the USA, with each country, rather than state, taking a different approach. However, EU legislature is now actively developing a coherent strategy after pressure from its member governments and also from the industry. In particular, a proactive approach and leadership is being shown by the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industry Associations, or EFPIA, who are proposing a unified approach to the problem. And it's important that the manufacturers are highly active in this, because in most cases they're the ones tasked with the responsibility of practical and workable solution. EFPIA have proposed unified codification, a 2D barcode, and verification at pharmacy. It should be highlighted here that there's a difference between verification and authentication. The EFPIA view is that their solution looks at verification, which allows you to take a judgment on the efficacy and the genuineness of a medicine, as opposed to authentication, which absolutely guarantees that the medicine inside a package is what it says it is. And in most cases, true authentication can really only be done at the forensic level, outside the normal day-to-day business of a pharmacy or a patient. Just to carry on for a moment with Europe, in Italy they have had national phase of Lino, and Belgium also has serialized labels on its packaging, both answering very different problems in their own way. More recently, Turkey mandated a serialization solution alongside a database initiative, and this is one of actually the first European countries to approach serialization and the database element that has been introduced. France, as a stepping stone, have introduced a requirement from January 1st, 2011 to have codification using data matrix on their products. At this stage, it doesn't involve serialization. In the United States, often seen as a leader in this area, the FDA has produced a number of mandates, particularly around e-pedigree, but timelines have proved difficult, particularly in respect of RFID, which they believed in the early days was going to be the silver bullet to anti-counterfeiting and fraud. A state-by-state approach, California, Florida, etc., has forced the pace and broadened the remit to include serialization. Crucially, over the last 18 months, the federal route is looking much healthier, and critical timelines have now been set, which look to preempt state regulation. Addressing another area, another continent, was Asia, and in particular China. If you look at the problems that China is perceived to cause the rest of the world as a source of as a source of counterfeit material into the supply chain, China has some work to do to improve its tarnished reputation. But counterfeiting is a problem that causes as much problems for the peoples of China as it does for the rest of the world. So China is currently looking at a state-driven mandate which will almost certainly include serialization. For the latest news, going back to the FDA and the US, they have just issued guidance for industry standards for securing drug supply chain standardized numerical identification for prescription drug packages. I think in short what we're saying is that at last the FDA have recognized the importance of serialization at item level for their medicines. And FDA, which we mentioned earlier, have just completed a live pilot in Sweden involving Swedish pharmacies where they did online and real-time verification of pharmaceutical product at point of dispensing. And this involved 95,000 different items covering 25 different SKUs. So, as you can see with our brief animation, we believe that one constant theme is emerging, which is the requirement for product verification delivered using codification and mass serialization. It's worth pointing out that a global problem, you would think, needs a global solution. But the reality of this is much more difficult, and trying to create a harmonized solution across the many countries and states involved is very difficult. Some element of this is actually entirely possible, and a lot of this is being done with the help of GS1, a non-profit making organisation, and EPC Global, who've been active in this area for many years. And if you look at the FPA code, which again is a standard-based approach, they're looking to include in the codification a product identifier, the GTIN or pseudo-GTIN. That's something similar to France's CIP code, or in the US terms, the NDC National Drug Code. It includes expiry date, batch numbers, and importantly, a serial number, which gives unique identification at item level. I'd like to hand over to my colleague Robert.
Thanks, Marcus. As Marcus explained earlier, it is very important that we strive to reach uniform coding standards, not only in Europe but also in the United States and the rest of the world. So the takeaway message of this slide is not trying to take you through every country, but for example, the left-hand top side, Turkey indeed being the first country to introduce serialization as of July of last year. There are other countries like Italy here in the middle where serialization requirements are currently in development. France, as mentioned by Marcus, introducing the CRP 13 code by January 2011, and other countries like Brazil, which is now going through the procedure of defining what requirements will be required by the Brazilian government. So the takeaway message is that, as is shown also in the next slide, that the European situation is now really like a patchwork situation. What we see happening is different coding systems using 7, 9, 16, 13 digits, or not even reaching the point of serialization. So the straightforward message and the cry of the heart, the cri de coeur of GS1 and FPA is that we reach uniform coding standards, not only in Europe, but also in the rest of the world. Now, I will try to really explain the two different principles that are the basis of the development of serialization solutions to address, amongst others, the introduction of counterfeit medication in the pharmaceutical supply chain. Now, on the left-hand side, we have depicted the authentication verification, i.e. the product security process, which is quite different from the right-hand side of the slides, the pedigree type of solutions, and I will go into detail to explain later on. The takeaway message of this slide is that the left-hand side, the European and FPA approach, the European approach, is focusing on ensuring patient safety by ensuring product security through verification and authentication of the product. And the right-hand side depicted here is the pedigree system as being proposed, amongst others, by the California Board of Pharmacy in the United States, which is securing the transaction, i.e. the movement, the security of the movement of the pharmaceutical pack throughout the supply chain. So what is very important, we believe, is that the two principles should be combined. For example, it's possible to have a perfect, legitimate and correct pedigree on a fake product, and the vice versa principle is possible too. It is uniquely necessary to combine the principles of verification and authentication with pedigree to ensure safe and secure supply chain, and thereby ensuring patient safety, because that's still the number one requirement of all these types of solutions. Now, somewhat more into detail, as mentioned before by Marcus, the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries, FPA, has the focus on serialization and authentication. So if you take the top left-hand corner, which is depicting here the pharma manufacturer side, the pharma manufacturer serializes a unique code, captures the information in a two-dimensional matrix. The 2D matrix code is printed on the outside of the pack, and subsequently the product serialization database will store the information as captured in the 2D matrix. Then subsequently the pack will follow the supply chain, finally at the top right-hand side of the slide, reaching the pharmacist or the hospital pharmacist, and at the point of dispensing, the two-dimensional matrix code is scanned and is verified against the original number stored in the product serialization database code, and thereby ensuring that through verification and authentication the product is the genuine product as being manufactured by the pharmaceutical company. The other guiding principle is the pedigree approach, and as explained before, is more US prone. What you see depicted here is again on the left-hand top side the pharma manufacturer, and then the product will be shipped via wholesaler 1, wholesaler 2, finally also reaching the point of dispensing, the pharmacy or the hospital pharmacist, and you see the growing pedigree depicted below that. But we have to make sure that the definition of a pedigree is nothing more than a document currently, or an electronic document, that is recording the changes of ownership of the drug through the supply chain. It only means that I will sell to Marcus and Marcus sell to Ray, and we write down that we sold and bought from each other. We have to point out, however, that just following a drug through the supply chain doesn't guarantee the authenticity of the product. It is very well possible to have a perfect pedigree on a non-authentic pharmaceutical product, thereby making it necessary to combine the two principles. Now, in first instance, we have been addressing only the prevention of counterfeit medication entering the supply chain, but there are other issues that need to be addressed. And just very briefly to go into that on the left-hand top side, product integrity and brand integrity is an issue. product returns, what we see happening is that the number of pharmaceutical products that are returned and which are also counterfeit is sharply on the increase. On the right side, of course, the regulatory compliancy that is necessary to be compliant with the California Board of Pharmacy pedigree requirements, the FDA recommendations, and or the mandatory legal requirements in countries like Turkey, Italy, Belgium, Brazil, and the other countries that for sure will follow throughout the world. Especially the left-hand bottom side showing that it's also possible with solutions like this to improve and enhance channel integrity. For example, to look closer at diverted product impacting your profitability or prevention or a reduction of the occurrence of parallel trade. So what we are addressing is not only the prevention of counterfeit medication entering the supply chain, but also to be used to optimize supply chain efficiency. Now, I think about a year ago, AMR Research interviewed, I think around 140 pharmaceutical companies, and these were already in the process of running a pilot or thinking about running a pilot. And as you can see on the right-hand side, about 40%, between 35 and 40%, is indeed indicating that detecting and eliminating counterfeit medication is a main driver. But you can also very clearly see on the left-hand side that, for example, improving the recall processes or improving product return processes or getting a greater inventory visibility of the supply chain are main drivers. So there is a variety of reasons and business drivers to start serialization in the pharmaceutical supply chain. And I'm handing back to Marcus.
Thank you, Robert. So what's so difficult about serialization? It's a question that we get asked many times. But actually, serialization can be a complex problem, especially when you're looking at data flows and product manufacturing. So what we're saying is that there's more to serialization than just generating numbers. Firstly, serialized packaging with labeling, code data has to fulfill a defined life cycle from generation to allocation on the product and beyond. So what does that mean? Well, as soon as you create the codes, unique codes to go on your packaging, you have to know exactly, does someone have permission to create it? Do they have permission to distribute it? How's that going to be implemented within your above-site processes and your on-site and line-level processes to ensure it only goes on the product that it's meant for and that those numbers aren't diverted and or copied by other people? A lot of people have run pilots, but certainly our view is that once past the pilot phase, serialization has major strategic implications at regional and global level, and they need thinking about very carefully. And somewhat obviously, a poor serialization approach can create massive unintended consequences and indeed increase vulnerability to a point where it is possible you might actually have to stop manufacturing or have mass batch recalls by a regulator because you created data that's not compatible with the authentication systems that might be put in place. Perhaps one of the greatest challenges is the sheer scale of the problem. We're not just talking about thousands of numbers or even tens of thousands. We're looking at millions and billions of numbers. Again, it's about creating a sustainable and scalable solution. This is not a solution for a pilot over a very small number of products. This is something that has to work over many years in a compatible and a continuous way. And in the face of ever-changing regulation, it means that you have to consider a lot of the problems very, very carefully indeed. You have to look towards the future and not just about what is happening now. Additionally, serial numbers have highly complex aggregated relationships, especially at different packaging levels, such as item to case and case to pallet and even to large container. So whereas at the moment you're only really dealing with an identity around a particular SKU or drug that relates to batch and expiry date, now you multiply that many times over by the number of items within that batch, and all of those elements you have to be able to trace within your own environment, let alone within the supply chain and or when it comes to authentication or verification at point of dispensing. project and budget. Well, this is a difficulty in its own right. Pharma organisations are very, very large organisations, and quite often responsibilities are separated in such a way that it's very difficult to communicate upcoming regulation throughout the organisation. So the impact of serialisation will normally require input from multiple teams in a manufacturing organisation and a manufacturing environment. And these cover, for example, packaging and design, ERP, data management, line configuration, warehouse management systems, and the list goes on. And getting all those people together often is extremely difficult. So again, it comes back to having a strategic approach, not only about how you're going to implement this, but actually how you organise any program and development for serialisation solutions. And lastly, but almost as vitally as all the rest, uniquely serialised product codification requires dedicated and secure management and administration tools. And I really can't overemphasise the importance of the security of the information that you're creating and the data that comes from it. So, managing and administering serialisation is perhaps the greatest challenge. From the original generation of uniquely serialised codes through to the life cycle and the audit logs, you have to have a highly flexible approach to mass serialisation. It has to be based on a robust and scalable database and application platform for integration into existing ERP, MES or SCADA-based approaches. Completeness of solution. Well, here we're really talking about the ability to manage and administer a robust serialization program through generation, high-speed authentication online, enterprise scalability, perhaps incorporating cryptographic security, and all the way through to FDA compliant or other regulatory authority auditing and lifecycle management. And this all has to be done with an environment where you're still meeting GMP and GAMP protocols and requirements. And lastly, for me at this stage, data carriers. It's just worth talking a little bit about this. RFID is something that's been mentioned for many years and was thought to be the silver bullet by the FDA, and for all sorts of reasons this has not come to pass. So the focus more recently has been on barcodes, and in particular two-dimensional barcodes, which you can encode a fair amount, a great deal of data. So hence the GS1 structure of GTIN and expiry date, serial number and batch and lot. This is the sort of data that can actually be encoded very easily into something like a data matrix. But don't for the moment ignore the RFID. Although we believe at this stage it's not right at item level, it almost certainly has great use and great benefit when looking at aggregated levels such as case and in particular pallet. So a lot of it, we're talking about data, we're talking about data carriers, but it's important to recognise it's about the data structure and the information that can go on this, and the use of machine vision in particular and scanning at pharmacies that allows very rapid access to database and information that sits behind that item level, and that's what gives you the full verification and or when required the track and trace capability. And to our heart at Prisym, of course, talking about labelling, the most important thing to highlight here really is that manufacturing performance must not be compromised by data handling. It's absolutely critical that you can run your manufacturing infrastructures in as efficient way as you do at the moment, and compromising line speeds in particular can have serious impacts on your business and your distribution model. I'll just hand over to my colleague Ray. Ray, thank you.
At this point, it's appropriate to talk a little bit about Prisym ID and Oracle's joint offering. Taking into account Prisym ID's long and enviable reputation for delivering specialist labelling and ID solutions to many of the world's leading life science companies, Prisym ID and Oracle are natural partners in delivering serialization solutions. Working closely with Oracle, we're able to provide validatable, secure, and FDA-compliant label solutions as a key part of the serialization environment, which can be delivered as either thin or thick clients, or a combination of both. The powerful combination of Prisym ID and Oracle's strengths make it possible to provide life science companies with the help and guidance needed to navigate the often highly complex manufacturing and IT landscape that is serialization. An example of this landscape is shown here in this slide. So, just to summarize, Prisym ID as an Oracle partner have 25 plus years experience in life sciences printing applications. Prisym ID's flagship solution, Prisym Medical Web, is an application that's been built on Oracle technology. And working with OPSM's development team, we've exchanged product unit serial data via web services. At this point, I'll hand back over to Robert.
Thanks very much, Ray. And just from my side to summarize what we have been talking about, I think this slide says it all. What you can see on the bottom of the slide is the route that the pharmaceutical pack is following through the supply chain. On top of that, the item information storage, the database that will keep the uniquely serialized numbers from the pharmaceutical manufacturer, and then potentially on top of that, the regulatory database, which can either be a country-by-country database or a more larger database governing the European situation. What is depicted here in the slide? For example, in red, you can see the track and trace authentication, information flow, the material flow, in gray, the information flow regarding the point of dispensing, the authentication process taking place there, and in the orange blip, the interaction points where Oracle Pedigree and Serialization Manager kicks in with respect to the handling of the information. So this is clearly showing the combination of serialization, pedigree, database, and database storage, which are all required in one solution to be able to provide the start of a safe and secure supply chain. And for my part, in conclusion, Oracle Pedigree and Serialization Manager, or OPSM in short, has been purposely built for and with the pharmaceutical industry, delivering an integrated serialization and pedigree management solution. And it certainly will be able to deliver you the business value and the regulatory compliance necessary to meet the several countries' requirements with respect to safety of medication. And with that, I think I'll give back to Ray, who will summarize what we discussed today.
Thank you, Robert. Please bear with us for a short time while we collate some of the questions which have come in during the course of the presentation. If you have any additional questions that you'd like to submit to Robert and Marcus, please submit them now using the question tool on screen. We'll try to answer as many as possible, and we'll also provide a written response to all the questions asked during the webinar. Thank you, everyone. We'll now be answering some of your questions.
Okay, thank you, Ray. And now to move on to some questions that have been posted. First of all, the question is, can I start to serialize some of my products before there are any specific regulations in place? I think the answer is that in principle, yes. Many of the larger pharma companies have done just that and run large-scale pilots. At a strategic level, they felt that they needed to be up to speed and well in advance of any regulatory requirement. The potential impact on existing processes and in particular manufacturing lines means that it's really essential to plan this into line and system design. Of course, a key element that you can put into place right now is the team structure, so you can start building understand and buy-in from key players in your organization. I think that's a critical point. You do have to involve quite a lot of people in this, at least at various stages. Okay, I've got another question. question is, I understand the core principles behind codification and serialization, but have yet to see any demonstration of it working. Since seeing is believing, can you run a demo for my team? Yeah, great question, and absolutely. There's lots of talk about it, lots of documents are published, but I think the answer is that yes, absolutely, Prisym and Oracle are in a position to show a practical demonstration of the solution in action, and take that same opportunity to discuss how we can help. I think when you actually see this in action, a lot of the processes become clearer, and it's easier for different members of your team to understand possibly what's required of them and the people they look after. Okay, we've got one final question for the moment, and that is, can you give an estimate of how much data flow and data we're talking about? People talk about the need for large databases, but how big is big? Right, well this one has been talked about on the conference circuit for a while, and I think the answer is actually fairly shocking. Okay, the flow of data required for serialization is significantly larger than at present, and there's the serialization life factor to build in too. It may be the case that the site will need to hold its own records, at least to the point where the goods leave its warehouse system and its custody in US terms. But beyond this, the data is likely to need to reside at an above-site level in a manufacturer's master serialization database. And this is where the new pedigree and verification transactions are likely to be handled, because that's something that the site really needs no knowledge of. But in terms of the amount of data, currently it's been estimated by a particular pharma company that we could be looking at 200 to 300 terabytes of data over about 5 years. And this is a crucial point, that the serialization and codification isn't a sort of a one-hit process. It's something that is an ongoing process, and in regulatory framework terms, this data has to be held really for the life cycle of the product and quite some time after that. So if you think that it potentially could take 6 months to get serialized products actually into the supply chain, it's not just a question of having data the moment it leaves you. It goes on for much longer than that. Anyway, that's really the final question for now. We've got further questions we can answer, and we hope to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. So finally, I'd like to thank you for attending, and we hope you found it both interesting and instructive. And of course, if there's any further information you'd like, please feel free to contact us. So thank you very much, and bye-bye for now.